The Pirates and Orioles do battle in MLB's first spring breakout game next week. Let's take a look at the roster Pittsburgh will field that features plenty of top young talent on today's episode of Locked On Pirates.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. My name is Ethan Smith, your host of this wonderful show here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app today and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase when you want to go to any sporting event, comedy event, theater event near you. Make sure you use Game Time. By the way, if you didn't know, my name again is Ethan Smith. You can follow me on Twitter right there at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. And what's going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates today? Well, it was announced, I found out about this yesterday, waited for it to come out to do a little bit of research for it. But we get the spring breakout games next week, which I think is, again, something that's going to be phenomenal for Major League Baseball moving forward. And I think it's very nice that the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Baltimore Orioles, two teams that have two of the top systems in all of baseball, will, of course, be on MLB Network next Thursday. And this offseason, the Pittsburgh Pirates and Orioles were announced to be facing off in the inaugural Spring Breakout game. And the Spring Breakout is an event, a 4-day event, that's going to span from March 14th to March 17th next week, with 16 exhibition games between each team's top prospects. So all 30 teams are participating in this. I think that's very fun. Each team, of course, will be comprised of all of their top prospects and their top young talent. So I think it's just a very good thing. And once this was announced, realistically, I think it was a phenomenal idea for Major League Baseball. You're getting eyes on young talent for the span of 4 days and allowing viewers like me and you and listeners like me and you to get a look at the potential future stars and players of their favorite teams, including the Pittsburgh Pirates. And this also adds another minor league event to the baseball calendar as well. We all know about the Futures game on All-Star Weekend. That's always very fun. Last year's Futures game was very fun for the Pittsburgh Pirates, and I expect that we'll see a ton of Pirates again come midsummer when that event rolls around. And each game in the Spring Breakout Series will also be broadcast through MLB.com or MLB Network, as well as regional sports networks. So to me, this is a very big deal for baseball, in my opinion. I think this is something, especially for the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Baltimore Orioles, right off the rip, to be on MLB Network. I think this is just something that baseball's needed to do for a very long time. And that's lean in to their young talent that they love to talk about. I mean, you always hear things about Skeens. You hear things about the likes of Jackson Holliday and Jackson Chorio and Brian Bayo, who just signed an extension with the Boston Red Sox, but they don't really advertise these guys much when they're in their minor leagues outside of, maybe that free minor league game of the day on MLB TV. But I would like to see more minor league baseball available to viewers on a more consistent basis, because I think it also just allows people to inform themselves on what players are truly going to be coming up and what kind of impacts that these players can have once they get there. And Pittsburgh and Baltimore, again, will face off next Thursday to start the event's national schedule, as the game will be broadcast on MLB Network. And we've already seen Baltimore and Pittsburgh play already this spring quite a bit. And we've seen the young talent already face off against each other. Remember, Paul Skeens debuted in spring against the Baltimore Orioles. A lot of us were very upset because it was not on television. Also, go check out the live stream that I did on that. It was very fun. And he debuted against 3 former first-round selections, including top prospect Jackson Holliday, and faced off against Adley Rutschman, Tyler Nevin. It was just very nice. And when these two teams battle in spring training right now with the roster, or the systems that they have and really the rosters that they have. It's always just fun to see these two teams go neck and neck. And now to have just their prospects face off against each other, I think that is just phenomenal work for Major League Baseball. Paul Skeens is, of course, a part of this event and a part of this roster, as is Jackson Holliday. So we could see another matchup between those guys, between two top 5 prospects in baseball. And I think it's something that would be very fun to see again. And Paul Skeens, joined by Anthony Solometto and Bubba Chandler, both top 100 prospects, both guys we've spoken about on this show at length. And he's also joined by other top 30 pitching prospects like Thomas Harrington, who's in the top 10, Braxton Ashcraft, who's in the top 10, Hunter Barco, and Patrick Riley. So pitching is going to be the focus, I think, in this game for Pittsburgh more so than what we see in the field. Non-ranked pitchers in the Pirates prospect list, J.C. Flowers, David Matoma, and Tyler Samaniego round out the pitchers for Pittsburgh that will be featured in the game. And as I mentioned, I mean, this pitching is the strength of the system and, of course, will be headlined here. I mean, Paul Skeens will likely start in this game, I think. We don't know that, obviously, with it being a week out. We don't really know what's going to happen in this game as far as who's going to start and how many innings these guys are going to pitch and all that other stuff. But it's just exciting to have the idea that Paul Skeens is going to get to face off against a Baltimore system that is loaded that we'll talk about here in a minute. Moving to the field, though, 29th ranked prospect Omar Alfonso will catch. And while we're speaking about this, by the way, go to Steel City Pirates and check out my breakdown of the Pirates' top 30 prospect list. It is a very good piece. I go in depth with each player in the system, giving you kind of an idea of what these guys look like and where they could be by the end of the year or when they could debut. Omar Alfonso, a little further away, the only catcher in system that's ranked in the top 30. Abraham Gutierrez and Axiel Plaz will join him behind the dish. And both of those guys are unranked. But catching right now, it's really all Henry Davis and Eddie Rodriguez. Eddie Rodriguez, of course, not playing this year, but that's really going to be the biggest thing that you're looking at. The infield for this roster for the Pittsburgh Pirates is a loaded group along with the pitching. And you already know that it's headlined by Termarr Johnson, who's had quite the spring thus far. We've seen some very good things from Termarr so far this spring. He'll be joined by 3 other top 10 Pirates prospects with Mitch Jebb at 8, Sung Shea Shang at 9, and Jack Brannigan at 10. I know I was calling him Jake Brannigan on the show the other day. I apologize for that. His name is Jack Brannigan, who comes in at 10, will join Johnson in the middle infield. Jebb, Chang, and Brannigan, by the way, the latter 2 I spoke about with MLB Pipeline's top 30, have some serious upside and should be a fun watch. So I'm excited to see those guys get an opportunity against Baltimore's prospects as well. Yordani De Los Santos, Garrett Forrester, Jesus Castillo, and Johnny Severino, who are all ranked in the Pirates' top 30 as well, join the party, with Forrester, I think, of that group being the most intriguing, seeing as he is the highest-ranked first baseman in the system for the Pittsburgh Pirates. So he'll likely play that position for the better part of the day. You could also see a guy like Jesus Castillo, who's a utility player, do that as well. And maybe, somebody else gets into that fold also. Non-ranked Tony Blanco Jr. rounds out the infield. Tony Blanco Jr., one of those guys that's going to be very, very far down the line, but a very intriguing international prospect for the Pittsburgh Pirates nonetheless. Lonnie White Jr. headlines the outfield group. He's joined by Shaylin Polanco, Jace Bowen, Estuar Sario, and Trez Gonzalez, who are all ranked in the Pirates' top 30. Obviously, you guys know I love Shaylin Polanco, so getting a look at him should be fun. While Trez Gonzalez and Lonnie White Jr. are still a bit away, but the closest of the bunch to debut, I think you're looking at next year and even early 2026 as times where you could see guys like Lonnie White Jr. and Trez Gonzalez really make an opportunity to be a potential 4th outfielder on this roster. And the Orioles will, of course, be headlined by Jackson Holliday, but he'll also be joined by 17th ranked prospect Samuel Basallo, who can play catcher and first and has some real pop. This kid's going to be good. I think he's going to be a great complement and potential DH to Adley Rutschman when he eventually gets up in the system. Still very young, still a lot of time to figure that out. Kobe Mayo is also playing for the Orioles. He's baseball's number 30 ranked prospect, while Enrique Bradfield Jr., if you're an MLB The Show fan, you remember his card from MLB The Show last year, but he headlines the outfield group, and I think Bradfield Jr. is going to be a pretty good player as well. And this gives the Pirates' top pitching prospects a fun challenge against one of baseball's top offensive systems, and I think it's going to be very fun to watch. And next Thursday, we'll take a deeper look at the game once pitching assignments and lineups are announced. But this is an exciting game from two exciting systems that I think should be a fun watch on MLB Network. And I think, again, that putting these kids in the spotlight from the minor leagues while you're talking about them so much and getting people informed about how good these players are going to be once they eventually come up to the majors is very, very important for baseball. And I think it is an awesome opportunity for everybody that's going to get to watch this game. And we're also going to be doing Know Your Enemy today, tomorrow, Tuesday, and Wednesday next week, talking about the Cincinnati Reds, the Chicago Cubs, the Milwaukee Brewers, and the St. Louis Cardinals. And we're going to take a look at those Cincinnati Redlegs and what they have to offer in 2024 and how the 2024 Pittsburgh Pirates could be very comparable to the 2023 Reds. But before we do that, folks, we're going to talk about Amazon Fire TV. Folks, Amazon Fire TV channels is your sports destination. To learn more, visit amazon.com/lockedonfiretv. And Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experience with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live television. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the March Madness tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels lets you dive into all the games, analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on all the latest in the world of sports, March Madness, NBA, MLB, and lots more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos as well. So check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit amazon.com/lockedonfiretv to learn more today. And folks, also don't forget that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on said Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available on the free Fire TV channels app and, of course, YouTube. And folks, welcome back to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. And on today's second segment of today's episode, we're going to actually start looking at these other teams in the NL Central. With the season closely approaching, I think it's important that we look at the Pirates' direct competition in the NL Central. And for the next few episodes, as I mentioned, we'll do one today with the Cincinnati Reds. We'll look at the Chicago Cubs tomorrow. We'll look at the Milwaukee Brewers on Tuesday and the Cardinals on Wednesday. We're going to take a little bit of a look at these teams, what they have to offer in 2024, and how the Pirates compare to these teams. And we begin with the Cincinnati Reds. By the way, make sure you go check out Jeff Carr and Stephen Offenbaker of Locked On Reds. Those guys are phenomenal people. Probably seen them on crossovers a lot on this show if you're a longer listener, but definitely will be crossing over with those guys throughout the year. And Cincinnati last year was definitely a surprise team. They took a noticeable step forward in 2023. They fought for a wild card contention into the last week of the year. A lot of people thought they might even get there. Instead, Miami ended up winning out on that. And much like Pittsburgh, Cincinnati is filled with young talent, but they also went out and made some offseason moves to patch holes in their roster that they saw last year. And that began with Frankie Montas, who is a guy that they really wanted to come in and supplement this rotation a bit. It's a rotation that has some questions and still has some questions, but they add Frankie Montas to a young core with Nick Lodolo, Hunter Green, Graham Ashcraft, and Brandon Williamson. And it's a group that I think could make or break the season for the Reds, especially if they deal with some injuries from that group. But Montes should help at least supplement some of the burden that the Reds have to worry about in the rotation. The Reds also acquired reliever Emilio Pagan to supplement star closer Alexis Diaz, who was one of the best closers in baseball last year. They also went out and added veteran Brent Suter from the Colorado Rockies. So that's a unit that should be pretty good for this Reds team as long as it stays healthy. Their major acquisition, and really their only acquisition in the field, came in the form of Jaime Candelario, who I think was a very sneaky good signing for this Reds team. And he's expected to pop around first and third base for them. And he's a guy that joins that very fun and youthful infield group of Elly De La Cruz, Christian Encarnacion Strand, Spencer Steer, Matt McLain. You're also potentially looking at a guy like Noel V. Marte making his debut at some point. So this is a young, youthful, energetic team. That's what the Cincinnati Reds are going to be. And you still have guys like Jonathan India and Tyler Stevenson involved as well. Tyler Stevenson, of course, going to be the catcher. Jonathan India, very interesting to me that he still hasn't been traded just yet. But he did sign an extension to buy out his arbitration years. So we'll kind of see what the Reds decide to do with Jonathan India, especially with all the options that they have in the infield right now. And, I mean, that's not even mentioning how good these guys were last year. You look at De La Cruz, who showed flashes of what he can be. CES, Christian Encarnacion Strand, another guy that I think could make a real impact for this Reds team moving forward. But really the best of the bunch was Matt McLain. And when you look at Matt McLain in an umbrella, he was good last year. And he's a guy that if he takes the next step could be a potential all-star this year for the Reds. The outfield group of this Reds team is definitely not as near as strong as the infield group. You have the likes of Jake Fraley and Stuart Fairchild out there. Will Benson, TJ Friedel also rounds out that group. MLB.com's depth chart, though, also suggests that Spencer Steer, that is, could play outfield as well in left field. So we'll see if that's something Cincinnati wants to do. But again, for the Reds, this is a solid young group with more on the way. I already mentioned Noel V. Marte. You look at right-handers Rhett Lauder and Connor Phillips, who could debut this year and help supplement that rotation a bit. Outfielder Blake Dunn also has a 2024 ETA and could offer some outfield help. Shortstop Edwin Arroyo could also have an outside shot at a debut this year. He's one of their top prospects. But with all that said, rounding this back to the Pirates for a minute, I think Pittsburgh could be on a similar trajectory to Cincinnati. They could just be a year behind that trajectory. Now, what do I mean by that? And you look at the Pirates, they're flooded with young talent. They're flooded with young talent that not only is on the MLB roster already, but is also going to be coming up this year. You look at Jared Jones, you look at Paul Skeens, you look at some of these other guys that could potentially make impacts. And it's a team that if that young talent really for Pittsburgh can tap into its potential, much like the Reds young guys did last year, they could see a similar jump in production and a similar jump in the win column. And the 2023 Reds and 2024 Pirates, to me, are not all that different of teams. I mean, you look at the excitement in the lineup that the Pirates have with Key Brian Hayes, Brian Reynolds, Jack Sawinski, Edward Olivares, Henry Davis, Leover Peguero, Jared Triolo, Rowdy Tellez, even if you want to throw him in there. It's very interesting that when you look at that 2023 Reds team, the offense was fun, but it also had questions in the rotation. Sound familiar? Yeah, the Pirates still have questions in that rotation. And for 2024, I mean, each team's over-under win total is only separated by 6 games. I mean, Cincinnati slots in at 81.5. Pittsburgh slots in at 75.5. I'll give my answer on Pittsburgh's over-under as part of my preview and prediction show for the 2024 season closer to opening day. For Cincinnati, though, 81.5 is intriguing. I think it could easily go over. But if injuries in that rotation happen, which they usually do in baseball, I could see that being an issue for Cincinnati, especially if it's the Hunter Greens or the Nick Lodolos of the world that are supposed to be those top guys for them. If those guys go down and you're forcing the likes of Rhett Lauder and others to really come up, or even a Brandon Williamson, and forcing him into a further role, that could be an issue for the Reds. And the young players played very well last year also, but it's possible some of them take a sophomore slump this year. And that could also be a thing that the Red Legs have to have in the back of their mind as well. Now, if I had to bet on it on FanDuel, these are FanDuel's odds, by the way, I would go over on 81.5, seeing as 82 and 80, I think, is well in reach for that Reds team. But it's not an easy over by any means. Now, I do think it's going to be very fun to see these two teams face off this year. Hopefully, we finally get that Ellie De La Cruz versus O'Neal Cruz one-on-one matchup. I want to see those guys go toe-to-toe. The other young guys, as I mentioned, Spencer Steer, Matt McClain, Christian Encarnacion Strand, Noel V. Marte, all going to be fun guys to watch. For Pittsburgh, obviously, you have Peguero, Davis, Sawinski, Olivares, Triolo, even as young guys to watch. You're going to be looking at Jared Jones and Paul Skeens eventually having to face this Reds lineup at some point. And as usual, I think this rivalry will be fun to watch all 2024. I don't think it's a surprise to say that I think that these matchups are going to be very even. I think it's going to be a very fun season series between these teams again, because they're just both very youthful, fun young teams. And I think when you look at the other teams in the division, these two teams arguably have the most upside to be competitive for the next 3, 4, 5 years. Obviously, the Brewers have Jackson Chourio. Obviously, the Cubs have a lot of pieces over there as well. The Cardinals still trying to figure some things out. We'll see what happens. And that's a brief look at the 2024 Reds as part of Know Your Enemy. And again, I truly believe the 2024 Pirates pale some comparison to the 2023 Reds. And we'll see how that pans out. And I think it's fun to look at your opponents and look at your divisional rivals and see what they were up to in the offseason. Again, we're going to take a look at the Chicago Cubs tomorrow. But for now, it's spring news and notes time. But before we get into that, we're going to take a look at Prize Picks. Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100, because football season may be over, but the action on the floor is heating up. Whether it's tournament season or the fight for playoff home court, there's no shortage of high-stakes basketball moments this time of year. So get in on the excitement with Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app, where you could turn your hoops knowledge into serious cash. Prize Picks, by the way, is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Conference tournaments are almost here, which means the biggest moments in college basketball are getting closer. Be a part of the action on Prize Picks for both men's and women's college basketball. That means you can bet on Caitlin Clark for more points, which I think you should just do because it's going to hit more often than not. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Download the app today again and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. And it's Prize Picks. You pick more, pick less. It's just that easy. And folks, welcome to the third and final segment of today's episode of Locked On Pirates here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. And as I've said on the show a couple of times, this third segment is always going to be spring news and notes up until spring is over. So it's another day, another segment of spring news and notes from what's happening down in Florida for the Pittsburgh Pirates. As mentioned earlier on the show, Pittsburgh and Baltimore have already faced off a few times this spring, and they did so again on Wednesday. Baltimore, of course, winning this one 6-4. Joshua Palacios made his spring debut batting leadoff and playing right field. Fully starting the right field battle between Palacios, Joe, and Olivares. And he scored a run, had a walk, and registered an RBI despite not recording a hit yesterday. Nice to see Palacios back out there. Very fun guy, friend of the show. Had him on the show last year, a few weeks before he actually got called up to the Pittsburgh Pirates. So that's always fun. Henry Davis's tear early in spring halted a bit yesterday. He was 0 for 3 with 2 strikeouts on the day. Jared Triolo continued to look good as well. He hit 1 for 3 on the day and moved his spring OPS up to 932. So things looking on the up and up for Jared Triolo. Liover Peguero, who is considered the front runner at second base per reports, and Derek Shelton, had a 2-hit day yesterday, getting on base in both of his at-bats and continuing his strong spring. Mitch Keller went 4 innings in his outing, moving over to pitching. He allowed 3 runs on just 23 pitches, but one thing that has been noticed out of Mitch Keller over the past couple appearances is that he has seen a bit of a velocity dip in his recent spring outings, which I'm not sure is something we should really worry about all that much. I don't think it's something that's going to be worrisome unless it becomes a trend. If we do see him come out again with a velocity dip in, like, let's say 1 or 2 more appearances in spring, it could be something to monitor going into his opening day start versus Miami. Truthfully, I think he's just probably working on things, trying to locate the pitches that he wants to locate, maybe even working on that cutter that he really didn't perform well with last year that I think he really wants to use. So those could all be factors into why his velocity is not where it usually is. And maybe he's also just not throwing the ball as hard as he typically does. So we'll see. I don't think it's much to worry about right now, but if it does trickle into the regular season, then I think it's something that we can have a real conversation about. Aroldis Chapman also made another appearance. He allowed 1 earned on 3 hits on just 7 pitches. Carmen Mlodzinski, who I expect to have a super breakout campaign in the bullpen, pitched another scoreless inning, having yet to give up a run this spring. Braxton Ashcraft added a scoreless inning as well. I think he has a chance to really do well in the bullpen at some point this year also. And Pittsburgh is off today after the night game last night, and Alex Stumpf of MLB.com highlighted some of the spring battles so far in a piece yesterday, and Ben Cherington in that piece said that 7 to 8 pitchers are involved for the final 2 spots in the rotation. And you're looking at guys like Bailey Falter, Roansy Contreras, Luis Ortiz, Quinn Priester, but it's been hinted a little bit that Jared Jones is a part of that competition as well, and he's looked strong this spring. So I don't think it's much of a surprise to say that, but I wouldn't expect that he makes the roster day one. I just have stood ground on that, but I would love to see if he actually does make the opening day roster. The rotation, by the way, continues to be a focal point for this team. We talked about it all offseason. We're going to continue to talk about it throughout the year because to me, I see that it has the potential to only get better as the season continues. I think it's something that's a real shot for this team. I think it's something that the Pirates can definitely look forward to with the likes of Paul Skeens, Jared Jones being options to come up. You have JT Brubaker and, of course, Mike Burrows coming back at some point midseason who could also be contributors to the rotation. You look at Martin Perez and Marco Gonzalez who could have bounce backs from their 2023s, and this rotation could suddenly become a positive for this team very quickly. Palacios, of course, being back, as I mentioned, means that right field battle ramps up a bit between Palacios, Joe, and Olivares. Henry Davis, I expect to be on the opening day roster, but it has been kind of hinted at that Jason DeLay and Ali Sanchez are also in the mix to join the opening day roster alongside Yasmani Grandal and hopefully Henry Davis. And as mentioned, you look at Liover Peguero, Jared Triolo, Nick Gonzalez, and Alika Williams, even Ji-Hwan Bae, all fighting for that middle infield time. So there's still tons to watch as spring draws on. But folks, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Locked On Pirates here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. My name is Ethan Smith. You can follow me on Twitter right there at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. You find this podcast, of course, on YouTube and on all of your audio platforms because it is free and available to you everywhere. So just listen. We're available Monday through Friday, and we are your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday afternoon and evening. I will see you tomorrow on Friday. But until then, folks, I will see you on the flip side.